Hey guys, you've probably heard the expression buy once, cry once, and today that's what we're going to be talking about. We'll be discussing what tools are going to be more worth it to spend a couple extra dollars on versus which ones you can afford to save a bit on.
So let's start with like precision measuring tools like calipers, multimeters, torque wrenches, things like that.
For me, that's one of the first places that I will spend money. I don't need like scientific grade instruments or anything like that, but you're paying for precision.
Yep.
Especially for, let's talk about that torque wrench.
Yep.
That is something that you are relying on in really critical applications. They give you those torque specs because it's important. And if your torque wrench is not hitting those numbers, I need to know that if I get a measurement that I can trust it.
Yep. You know, a typical torque wrench is only going to give you your actual torque reading, where a more, advanced digital torque wrench might give you angle and things like that, which you're going to need in different type of applications.
Absolutely.
Fantastic point.
If you get a good manufacturer, you can always send it out, get it recalibrated, you know what it is. If you're buying from Snap-on, they even have a tester on the truck where you can actually measure the torque and make sure it's reading correctly.
Yeah. Right.
So it is important, to go over and beyond when you're dealing with a tool like that.
And I think too, with something like a multimeter, if you buy a nicer one, it's also going to have more features that will be useful to you.
Yep.
So
Right.
Totally
I'm sure
agree.
this is something that you're pretty passionate about because you build a lot of harnesses and things, so
Yep.
you need to make sure that everything is exactly what it needs to be.
Yeah, when you're diagnosing a vehicle, if you don't have the right values on your meter, you're not going to be able to come to the right
You're shooting in the
conclusion.
dark.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the few places you can reliably get your money's worth out of buying that mid-grade or even premium offering from whatever manufacturer you're going with. That's getting you not only more features, more support, but also just having that trust, knowing that what it says is something that I can use to make a decision.
And I think one of the things to consider when it comes to buying more expensive tools is that they come with a lifetime warranty. Do you guys think that that's something that adds value and is worth it?
I mean, for me,
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. I know for myself, working in a shop every day and depending on my tools, I really need a reliable tool. And usually the ones with a lifetime warranty, they aren't breaking as frequently. And not only that, I know the truck is going to be there. So when I have broken tools, they're going to be here. It's not going to take me time to go out and resource all my tools.
I think another thing to talk about here is lifetime warranties on the other end of the spectrum, right? We have the premium stuff, make a big deal about their lifetime warranties for good reason, like you're paying for that. But you can also get some really cheap tools these days that have lifetime warranties. I at least end up using them in a completely different way. I don't want to say that I abuse these tools, but I am not afraid to pound on them, put a breaker bar on it, whatever I have to do, and work that thing until the point of failure. And when it quits, that's fine. I had a feeling that would happen. So go get another, get back to work. But that saves wear and tear on other tools that I might not want to do that with.
Right.
So the next thing I'd like to talk about are sockets and wrenches. I know personally, when I was first getting started in the automotive industry, I just got whatever was cheapest, but there certainly are some things that you should spend a little extra money on. You want them to be strong.
Maybe shooting for that at least middle of the road grade, where I know if I put a lot of effort into this, I'm not going to break my tool, but at the same time, I'm not spending so much on these that I'm neglecting other tools that I should be having. It can be a tight balance to walk.
Yeah, the cheaper options out there are, bulkier and bigger, and they aren't really a good solution. And they make them bigger and bulkier to make them stronger, but they don't live up to their expectations.
Sure.
I think that anything that has a ratcheting mechanism, I'd like to spend a little bit more on compared to something that doesn't. So some regular closed-end wrench doesn't need to be fancy to me, but something that ratchets, or a nice ratcheting wrench, I want it to always work.
Yeah, and not only that, like talking about ratchets, the tooth count is huge because when you're in a tight spot, you're going to want that better ratchet with a higher tooth count where you can actually get in there and make a turn without, tons of clearance.
Sure. So as you're filling out your box, there are loads of specialty sockets and things like that. Hex, Torx, deep well sockets, spark plug sockets, and those things can fill up drawers pretty quickly too, especially with things like Torx. I find that it's really worth paying up just a little bit more to get that precision fit.
And not only that, like, a Torx bit is so small that if you have a cheap one, you're more likely to, break a tooth off or actually round out your fastener, which is going to, give you a big headache. And it isn't worth saving money on those tools and then ended up costing you money in the long run.
Right, with all the money that it costs to fix all your mistakes, you probably could have just bought the right tools to begin with.
Time is money.
Absolutely. One type of tool that I think deserves its own special section of this video would be tap and die sets, as well as the tools that you're putting your taps and dies into.
Yep.
This is somewhere that I personally have experienced the lows of what the cheap stuff does and the highs of what it's like to use a truly precision tap and die set.
Yep.
The difference is night and day. Has that been your experience too?
Yeah, the good one cuts through like butter.
Yeah, absolutely.
When it comes to actually using a tap and die set, you're going to have different tools that hold those taps and dies. It's like maybe a ratcheting piece
tap
or something.
socket.
Yeah,
I love them. Yeah, tap sockets, can't live without them. When you need to tap something that's, in a remote location, you can, utilize an extension and really get in there and knock it out.
It can save the day.
Yeah, absolutely. Another important part of working in a shop is personal protective equipment, ear protection, masks, things like that. Like, you really, for me, I know I want to buy the good stuff. If I'm trying to protect my eyes.
I'm in the exact same boat. I think maybe even more than the precision instruments. This is where I will spend money without worrying about it at all. It is totally justified. If I have some goggles between my face and something that I'm grinding on or whatever, that is worth every penny to have security, knowing this thing was tested, developed, manufactured to the right standards, but also generally more comfortable to wear.
Yep.
Easier to use and see through, like safety goggles or something like that. And I found too with ear protection, the nicer you go with muffs or something like that, they have a distinct difference between how much sound they can block versus cheap stuff.
Yep.
I was really surprised when I replaced muffs a few years ago for some 3M ones.
Yep.
And this is what they're supposed to be doing.
Yep.
Right.
That's on me.
Absolutely.
So hopefully there's not too much hearing damage from that.
And I like that you touched on the comfort component of that, because one of the most annoying things, well, PPE is never annoying, but if it's uncomfortable, you're not going to want to wear it.
Yep.
Right. That
So-
defeats the whole purpose.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Respirators are that way, having different adjustments and things when you're working around chemicals and particles you don't want to be breathing.
It's true.
It's worth all the money in the world.
Absolutely.
Now, another part of a mechanic or technician's equipment that doesn't get a whole lot of attention would be boots and shoes. It really is a part of your equipment. It's something that you are relying on from the minute you clock in until the minute you clock out. What do you look for when you're buying some footwear, and is it worth paying more for some nice stuff?
I know that I was on the train of buy the same $40 pair of shoes and just wear them until they are falling apart just because it was saving me money.
Yeah.
But then I was wondering, well, why does my back hurt every day? Oh wait, it's because I'm wearing the same, $40 pair of shoes. So now what I look for is something that's comfortable to stand in and ideally has that steel toe, because no one likes dropping a wrench or heavier things on your feet.
Yeah, the bottom line is we're on our feet all day long, sometimes 12 hours, even, from when you leave the house. It's not just from when you clock in, but from when you leave the house till you get home, you're in these shoes, and it's priceless on your, on your back and just your comfort. You're going to do a better job if you're comfortable.
Right.
So I'm a firm believer of spending money on shoes.
So as technicians, we're trying to get the jobs in and out as soon as possible. And one of the things that really helps us to speed up these jobs is to use battery-powered tools.
When I first got into this, constantly looking at different options out there, one of the most important things I look for is coverage. I want a manufacturer that has all the tools I'm going to need, so I don't have to have multiple different types of batteries. Another important factor is how long do the batteries last? Because if I have to keep replacing the batteries, that's the most important part of those cordless tools. And luckily I've had great luck with my Snap-on ones. I'm still on my same batteries for about 8 years.
Yeah, I would almost argue if you're going to go really cheap on something, maybe it's a tool you don't use that often, just get the corded version.
Right.
It's not going to be as convenient, but you're not using it that much, right? So instead of having to deal with cheap batteries that don't last that long, it might be worth just going to a corded. All right, so let's talk about lighting. If you're just a DIYer doing a little bit of repair at home, you could probably get by with the same headlamp you use for camping, but when you're working in a shop environment, customer vehicles, you're going to need way more firepower than that. So what are some lighting tools that you think are worth the investment?
My personal favorite are the magnetized rechargeable lights. I love that whenever it's dead, I don't need to replace batteries or anything. I just plug it in every night before I go home. Next day, it's ready to go.
Yeah,
Yeah, lighting is something I don't cheap out on. All my lighting is Snap-on, cheaper lights that you can buy from $6, $8. They just don't last. You know, you're gonna get a couple months out of them and then they're not holding a charge, or you get about 15 minutes and then they die. Spending money on lights, super important. You can't really do a good job without seeing. So I am not, you know, I am not gonna cheap out on that. Another really good tool for lighting is underhood lights, those retractable lights that clamp onto the hood. My Snap-on electric tools, they sell one that takes the exact same battery. So I run that light and it's a lifesaver.
Yeah, I think manufacturers are getting smarter about keeping all the tools within the ecosystem, even stuff like a hood light that you might not think of right off the bat. Being able to change that battery, charge it with all the same stuff that everything else uses. That's killer.
Awesome.
The nicer your light is, usually the better the output is. I've definitely found that the cheap stuff is just weak compared to a nicer flashlight with a premium LED in it. Like there's a difference. And the more I can see, to your point, the better I can take care of whatever it is I'm trying to fix.
Yeah, and there is a situation where it's too much light. And so those high-end lights, actually, you can dim them. So it is, you know, a good quality light is super important.
Those features are what you're paying for.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the last thing we should talk about here would be specialty tools. These are kind of oddball things that might only be used once or twice, or maybe they only fit a specific application. So it can be hard to justify spending a bunch of money on them because of how rarely they're used.
Right.
What's your take on that? Is that something that you would pay for, or is it sort of case by case?
It really is a case-by-case basis, and I feel like this, you don't always have a lot of options. It's usually something from the dealer, or it's like one company that makes a copy of it. So there isn't too much of an option, but I definitely think that, you know, when you need that tool, you need to buy it. And a lot of times, if there is an aftermarket availability for that specialty tool, that's the route I'm going.
Right, and sometimes the specialty tool is there because if you don't use the specialty tool, you're going to damage whatever it is that you're working on. So I think it is case by case.
Or you always have the alternative of making your own tools, which can come in handy sometimes, especially if it's something pretty simple. It's, you know, you just have like a threaded section that moves back and forth to press something into place. Anybody who is familiar with a welder and has a box of odds and ends from different hardware projects, you can probably make something, but to get that truly professional result, a lot of times you just gotta pony up and buy the tool.
It's true.
So it sounds like, with very few exceptions, if you want to be a professional, you need to invest in professional tools and equipment. If you want to check out our other video on helping customers choose the right parts for them, head over to Shop Press. I'm Miriam, this is Greaser and Nick, and we'll see you next time.